You're watching Federal Workforce Fallout. I'm Larry Miller. This show is dedicated to the reduction of the federal workforce and the impact that it's having on workers, their families, and our local and national economy. This week, we've been talking a lot about that Cyclospora outbreak, now impacting several states. The microscopic parasite has sickened more than 1,000 people nationwide, and some are even blaming cuts to the federal workforce for the outbreak. Our Kelly Vaughn leading us off.
This announcement about finding the source, that has definitely confused me a bit because I thought I was safe, and clearly I'm not.
We're trying to be healthy, and we're trying to eat right, we're trying to do all the right things, but the messaging is confusing, and so we're not quite sure where to go.
And I'm afraid with all the funding cuts that we've had that we don't really have reliable sources anymore, so it makes it really scary.
The FDA says they are still testing for Cyclospora, but at this point haven't found any.
The problem here is that we lost our surveillance system.
Jill Roberts is a microbiologist that tracks outbreaks like cyclosporiasis. She says last summer the CDC scaled back the Foodborne Disease Active Surveillance Network, or FoodNet. It went from the mandatory tracking of 8 pathogens to just 2. One of those cuts was to Cyclospora.
No one's testing the food because it doesn't make any money. No diagnostic lab or clinical has any interest in that. But FoodNet did.
She says what would have happened, hypothetically, if FoodNet was still tracking Cyclospora is back in May when Michigan got their first case, they would have reported it to FoodNet. Then when New York and North Carolina got their cases, that would have triggered an alert and an investigation by FoodNet that could have stopped the spread before it reached more than 30 states. She says instead now we had to wait until hundreds of people were reporting symptoms.
This is public health 50 years ago. It's reactive. We put proactive in place so we didn't get here. This was predictable.
And that was our Kelly Vaughn reporting with that story. Now, we've talked a lot about the impacts of the cuts to the federal workforce and DEI programs, specifically on Black women. And data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and Labor Report showing that a major spike in job losses for Black women, with more than 300,000 jobs lost from early to mid 2025. And now new data is giving us another look and is helping us better understand what exactly is going on. We have survey data from the 10th annual Power of the Sister Vote poll conducted by the Black Women's Roundtable and Sojourn Strategies. The survey of 1,000 Black women voters provided interesting information about things like pay inequality and the impacts of DEI on them and their families. Among the key findings, 43% of Black women said that cuts to DEI programs have already affected them or someone close to them. Joining us to talk about that survey and the findings, the climate for Black women, especially those that are involved in the federal workforce, Dr. Avis DeWeaver, researcher and owner of Nouveau Strategies. Her firm partnered with Black Women's Roundtable for this survey. And Dr. Vanessa Weaver, CEO of Alignment Strategies, joining us to talk about the mental health impact and fallout of this as well. Ladies, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us and continuing this conversation.
Well, we certainly appreciate your continued support as well. Let's look at this sort of big picture, right? I mean, 1,000 people participating in the survey certainly gives us a very good sort of a little bit of a taste about what's going on currently. What sort of stood out to you in all of this? I mean, because the data really is very clear about the impact that these cuts have had on them and their families.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that really stood out to me was that education wasn't a shield from the impacts. Not only were 43% of Black women say that either they themselves or someone they knew were impacted with regards to DEI, but they were more likely to say that if they were college-educated Black women. 46% of them said that was the case. And so all of these things that Black women have done over the years in order to be able to play by the rules, get the education, do the work, do everything that we're told we're supposed to do in order to reach the ring of success, when push came to shove, it didn't serve as a protector when they went for these attacks against DEI and specifically attacking the federal workforce.
Dr. Weaver, your thoughts on that?
I was going to say, not only was that true in the federal workforce, but also in the private sector. When you look at the percentage of people that are losing their jobs, a high percentage of them have also been Black women. So it's not just federal sector, although the federal sector is the most pronounced, let's be real clear about that, because of the DOGE, restructuring and downsizing and outsizing votes.
So let's look at some of the survey data that was provided. We have this graphic here showing that 78% of Black women said that the economic conditions are currently getting worse. There was this sort of assumption that, things were rocky, but were getting better. But clearly the data is showing something else as it relates specifically to that. Does the data suggest that Black women in particular are in a sort of unique position in terms of race, gender, class, that maybe the things that are impacting the broader economy is even more pronounced on this particular group?
You know, I believe so. What's really interesting about that particular stat is that, as you mentioned, this is the survey that we've done for 10 years now. The last time we did this was in 2024. That 78% of that are now saying things are getting worse. So only 55% said that the last time we did this survey. And so it's really jumped a lot between now and then. Black women, I think, have been targeted largely because a lot of the industries that we are clustered in, like the federal industry, was targeted, but also the DEI emphasis has hurt them because they've been assumed to be sort of the face of DEI. And so they are not only the people who are out here doing this work, they're the ones that have been targeted, and now that they have been targeted, they are really having a hard time in order to really put the pieces together to make sure that their lives are coming together economically. They're suffering a great deal, and the survey really bears that out.
Was that rather concerning for you in terms of in that regard?
Absolutely. I mean, you had over 40% of Black women who are saying that at some point they have to either buy less food or buy less expensive food in order to make ends meet. 1 out of 4 was saying that they either skipped a meal or ate less so that other people in their family could eat. I mean, these are very dire circumstances. And so it's difficult to see that they are feeling this in the way that they're feeling this, but I'm also encouraged by the fact that many of them are seeing some hope for the future, and that, I think, speaks to their level of resilience.
Dr. Weaver?
No, I was just going to also make this point. When we looked at the impact, as you mentioned, on black women are carrying a disproportionate impact on the effect of the federal downsizing. And when we look at groups that have rebounded, over 300,000 white men have increased their jobs over this period, so they're rebounding. Even with Latinas, you know, we were at about 190,000 Latinas that are rebounding. And yet when you look at blacks, particularly black women, we're not. And also seniors are not rebounding. And so folks think it's like it's affecting everybody equally, and it is not.
Interesting point there. Another key statistic that was also found in the survey, 74% of black women are concerned about the cost of basic necessities like food, light, gas as well. We know many of these women probably that were surveyed were likely head of households for many of them. We know that if you're making less money in your home, that impacts not just the worker, but also the family that depends on that income for basic necessities as well. You talked a little bit about sort of the education myth that many have been sort of led to believe, that if I went to school, got an advanced degree in many cases, that would sort of protect me and shield me from situations like this. But clearly the data suggesting that is a fallacy.
It's a fallacy right now, but I just want to say it hasn't always been that. I mean, the reality is, having looked at data like this for many, many years, I can tell you that it wasn't so long ago that a black woman needed to have a PhD in order to earn earnings on par with a white male with a GED. Wow. That is a fact. And so black women have had to do this in terms of getting higher levels of education because they understood that in order for them to get the types of jobs that they needed in order to ascend to the middle class, they needed those extra degrees when other demographic groups did not need it. Okay, what we're seeing right now is the result of the attack on the civil rights infrastructure that created more fair workplaces. And as that infrastructure has been pummeled, quite frankly, under this administration, as well as now the EEOC changing their rules to make it more difficult for people who are not white males, to be perfectly frank, to be able to report employment discrimination. We are seeing this play out in the real lives of black women in very disturbing and destructive ways.
Dr. DeWeaver, the administration has been clear, though, that these policy changes are about making the country race neutral, as they say. That they say, and I'm giving you the perspective because the administration has been clear. The administration says that they're making this race neutral, based primarily on meritocracy as opposed to race, and that they say that by implementing these policies, making these changes, that it will make the country better, make the process a bit more fair. To that point, you say what?
I look at the cabinet and I say, where's the meritocracy? When you have the most unqualified, quite frankly, vice president that we've had in the history of this nation. He was only in the Senate for like 2 years, and all of a sudden you're vice president. You have a Secretary of War who has a tremendous history of not being qualified for that position. Just a huge gulf between where he was and every other person that we've had in that position. Look at the Secretary of Health. What sort of qualifications are there? I could go point by point by point. What I am arguing here is that those are not outliers. When you do not have corrective measures in place in order to make sure that people are really judged fairly. We understand that the history of this nation, and in fact the contemporary reality of this nation, if you look at who are in these positions of leadership, the most unqualified cabinet that we've had by any measure imaginable that we've had in the history of this nation, I would say what you're seeing here is a reflection of the fact that when you do not provide real force behind making people provide equal opportunities for all people across race and gender, we then rescind back into a tradition of this country of assuming qualifications among certain demographics and assuming disqualifications or unqualified nature when it comes to other demographics. That specifically makes it harder, not only for Black women, but other people of color and women generally as well.
Yeah, I mean, we really have real data now on the disparate impact when you don't have those kind of controls and systems in place to really impact and support women, people of color in jobs and getting promotions and et cetera. And this whole thing of meritocracy and, just not have all of these rules because everybody is, very decent people and they're going to be fair. It's not being borne out. And I think it really, I just commend you for putting more attention on this because the data is not supporting that.
Well, I think it also bears a bigger question about sort of DEI in general. I mean, Dr. Weaver, you work in this space. You know that there has been a long time concerted effort to roll back and to change DEI as we know it. This is not something that just happened overnight. This has been going on for decades. What could have happened a little bit differently that could have maybe changed the sort of perception that people have of DEI? Because for some, it was hard for them to stomach. Stomach the idea that someone else was getting an opportunity simply because they are male or female, Black, white, or whatever, that their race or something that was unique about them gave them an advantage compared to someone else that was equally qualified.
Well, I would say this, that, there always have been attacks on diversity, affirmative action, or whatever. But prior to this recent attack, there had been tremendous data that showed the positive impact of DEI on business performance and on stock prices. I mean, companies that had diversity, equity, and inclusion practices where women had a fair shot, inclusion on boards, they outperformed those that did not. I mean, the data is irrefutable. And so, because before, people could say DEI was whatever, Black History Food Week or whatever, or Latino Food Week, but really there had been much more a concerted shift to really look at how can you create diverse teams, people who have diversity of thought, who are from different parts of the world. How can you bring those diverse people together to drive more innovation, to drive more creativity? And as a result of that, businesses were outperforming those that did not. That was data from McKinsey, from Deloitte. I mean, it's just been irrefutable. And so companies have started to say, okay, now we really understand the business impact. The moral impact is important, but we really understand how it's driving business performance, business results, how it's retaining our employees, how we're developing supervisors that are much more effective at supervising people of differences and getting more from those people. And so organizations have began to embrace that. We had the CEO for Action group, and they had about 1,600 CEOs, and they signed a pledge that committed to really deal with issues around unconscious bias in the workplace, dealing with issues around how do we increase supervisors' skill sets and capabilities to really manage people that are different. How do you get the employees more engaged? So there was a tremendous push and a lot of momentum that was started. And then we had the George Floyd situation where, as you know, it was then everybody was trying to really redeem themselves in many ways. And that was probably, one of the turning points. The good thing is that people are saying, we do have some issues here around racism. We need to deal with it. And then certain groups got very, very concerned about that and started a strategy. America First, for example, was the organization in 2023, 2022 and 2023, before the current administration came in place. There was a real concerted effort to get to really challenge organizations that were doing DEI. So people think it just started with the current administration. No, it had not. It had impacted corporate America pretty significantly, and they were already beginning to slow down their DEI programs or eliminate them or change the names or whatever. And then when the current administration came on, it's just like a snowball effect. I think in our last show I told you DEI is on life support. And that is really true. And it's unfortunate because we know that it really does positively impact business performance.
You say that it's on life support. Some people would say that it's already gone.
It's not already gone.
Really?
No.
Okay. Dr. Dewey, what do you say about it?
You know, it's definitely in its last legs in this form, but here is what I would say. I would say that what we have seen is a completely, as I mentioned, a completely undermining of civil rights infrastructure in multiple ways, including DEI, but other ways as well. And one good thing I can say about having that happen, which is not much you can say good about it, this took literally centuries of work. People died to create the expansion of rights that have been pummeled by this administration. But one good thing I could say is that it also provides a moment in which we can begin to think creatively about what needs to be. One could always say that those things were advancements and they were needed. And they did result in positive outcomes for businesses and for families and for the overall arching economy of this nation. But
For the world.
For the world, exactly. We are a global economy. But one thing that we can have now is to begin to think creatively about what do we need to put in place now that would be better, that would be more stringent, that would be more lasting, and that would have a powerful impact on people's lives, and that would create a more fair and equitable society. This is a time for us to start to think about how do we not just replicate what was, how do we create what should have always been, but has not been yet. And that is our challenge moving forward in the future in terms of developing those types of institutions and actions and practices that will create a real equality of opportunity at the likes of which we've really never had in this nation, but what we strive to be, or at least we have said we have strived to be.
But when you look at it, I mean, in terms of the evolution of DEI, it's gone through stages. I mean, at first it was affirmative action, and then it evolved to multiculturalism, and then now it's DEI. So in many ways, it has been maturing as we've gained more and more experience around how does it play out, impact business, how does it play out and impact our not-for-profit, how does it play out and impact just the global economy. And so I think that when you look at the progress of that in terms of where we started, which was almost nothing in the 60s, to where it's evolved now, it's made a lot of progress. But to your point, we are going to have to look at some different models. And I think some different accountabilities. For example, you know, in those organizations, we had, you know, CEOs who had made a commitment to diversity because of the business impact, yet they folded very, very quickly. And I think that the response to our communities of color, you know, to our leadership was slow on this. I mean, you know, I said the train was already out the gate when people really began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. And so some of that, I think, is our responsibility to say, how did we miss that, and how do we not miss it going forward, and really hold, you know, people accountable, you know, and really push forward in a more strategic way.
Well, some would suggest that being a colorblind society would be the way of sort of making things equal for everyone. Is that practical? Does that work in your opinion? Could that be something that you could support in theory?
No, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when I hear the phrase colorblind, honestly, the hairs on the back of my neck stand.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Because first of all, it's not true unless you are literally a blind person. When you see me, you see who I am. You see my color. And to strive for color blindness means that you are looking to erase me. You are looking to erase who I am, my history, my culture, what makes me me. You know, for me, you know, people have always talked about, similar to color blindness, they've used this concept of a melting pot. A better concept to me is to think of it as a tossed salad, where each individual ingredient retains its full flavor, its full color, everything that makes it distinct. But when you put it together, it creates something delicious and new. And so I don't want to be reduced to a shell of myself in order to feel as if that's the only way I can fit in. I want you to see me. I want you to appreciate me. I want you to recognize my true history and culture and not try to hide it.
Yeah, and really that's important, because the only way that you can drive innovation is really to appreciate the differences that individuals bring to the workplace or to a social situation. And by acknowledging those differences, and you look at ways of how then do we pull those differences together to really catalyze it into something bigger and broader.
Absolutely.
And that really is the direction that many of our companies were going, and I think several people got scared of it because that's a real different power play. It's a different power dynamic.
Well, I mean, it is because, but it does seem that it sort of doesn't touch on the sort of the politics of all of this, right? I think there's this sort of social responsibility that some here is being advocated, right? That we all should want everyone to be able to have a fair shot, right? Regardless of who you are, and not being erased, being seen,
Right.
but also being given a fair and equitable opportunity. But we all know that there is a very clear political culture that is driving all of this, right? And so I think what is the strategy there? I mean, if we had to look at sort of how we get sort of forward motion, how do we address this disparity, how do we address this inequality, that happens at a state house, that happens on Capitol Hill, that happens at the White House. It seems sort of relying on sort of social responsibility, social consciousness, seems to put more of the responsibility on the average person when we know that really what gets change in this country is policy.
Yeah, but people drive those folks that change policy. So I think it has to be a stronger and a much more strategic community focus on this. I think the community needs to understand what are they losing or what have they really lost and why is it in their self-interest to move in a different direction. I see the communities as being important to catalyze the political and the business communities. And when you hear nothing from those communities, then it makes it easier for people to do what they choose to do.
I do think, though, that people are seeing what's at stake.
Now.
They're definitely seeing it now, especially when you saw the Calais decision. We saw a great deal of anxiety and, quite frankly, anger. Rightful indignation by the Black community who understand that these are rights that our ancestors fought and died for. And understanding that you have a Supreme Court now that has meticulously gone after one civil rights advancement after the other, after the other, after the other. And I believe something
Project
really
2025.
broke. Exactly, they've been following that to a T. I would say that when Calais happened and the Voting Rights Act was effectively gutted, I believe that has really spawned a great deal of enthusiasm, specifically in the Black community. I would not be surprised if we see somewhere near record-breaking turnouts in this midterm election, because the best way to make someone want to come out and fight is to tell them that they can't have something take something away. And to see the immediate reaction, thinking of how many centuries it took to, first of all, have access to voting rights in this nation, and to only have the Voting Rights Act in play now for 60 years, and then all of a sudden we are told, okay, yeah, everything is balanced, everything is quote unquote colorblind, and then the day after you have Tennessee move immediately to get rid of Black districts. Black people, and Texas did it even before, right? And so I have to say that, people know what's going on. I mean, we don't have to be told that it's raining outside to get have somebody tell us to pick up an umbrella. We understand what's going on. And that is motivating. We've already seen it motivate very high turnouts in terms of a number of these primary elections in certain states. And I think that this same level of it's time for us to fight back will happen at the polls in November.
And I think you see diverse communities. I think a lot of the energy is also coming from diverse communities. I think the white communities, for example, are seeing what they're losing now. And they can see that they have in a country that's different than what they had envisioned it. And that this thing is impacting them in ways that they hadn't imagined or didn't even think was possible. So I think that, that mobilization of that community, of folks who were saying, maybe they were middle road, but now saying, I really need to step up and speak out and make a difference. I'm excited about that, frankly.
Yeah.
I want to jump back to the survey just really quickly to wrap something up here related specifically to Black women. We talked about the education fallacy, and I just wanted to touch on that quickly. What are we telling Black women now? I mean, given the survey results and what that information revealed, which was, I think, arguably disturbing about in terms of how Black women are feeling about their conditions in their families, in the workplace, in their livelihood. What do you tell them now? Should they go and get the advanced degree? Should they go and try to climb the corporate ladder in the same ways that they have been? Should they should they be trying to sort of play a game that some would say is stacked against them consistently?
I think that, we need to do all the things, but I also think one of the big takeaways for me is to really understand the importance of collective economics. How can we support our own businesses? I'm a business owner. Dr. Weaver's a business owner. I mean, we can employ people. And how do we support our own businesses such that we can grow our internal economy? We're already seeing it kind of happen naturally a little bit more now, where Black people are becoming very, very focused on finding Black businesses to support.
In fact, if I can say,
absolutely.
Black women, who lost their jobs, their number one strategy has been to start their own businesses. It's been a tremendous upsurge in Black women starting their own businesses.
And so, just to make sure I'm clear, they should continue in the same fashion that they have been, but also look to their own communities and maybe even entrepreneurship as a means of sort of mitigating some of this.
I definitely think so. I also think that when you're looking at college education, be very thoughtful about what you are going to major in. Think about what are the job opportunities going to look like in the future. The terrain is changing really quickly. It's very sad to see young people right now, and this bears out in the survey, have a lot of angst when it comes to the economy because they are finding that they went to college, they got these degrees, and maybe the job prospects aren't what they thought it would be in their area.
In a moment,
exactly.
Right
So it's a very fast changing world. So trying to think about what would be the best way for you to arm yourself with the type of education that you need. It might be a college education, it might be a specific certification. It might look a little bit different than it looked yesterday, but trying to make sure that you are preparing yourself for the world of tomorrow, not just the world of yesterday.
And I think it's also important for business leaders. I mean, the responsibility can be all on Blacks, and if we did everything the correct way, it's not going to have the same amount of impact as our business community stepping up and saying, look, we really have an accountability here. And the business community voice has been pretty silent over the last couple of years. And so I think really putting some focus on business leaders, encouraging them to do, and in private conversations, they're telling me one thing, but they're saying, we can't really be vocal about that because potential repercussions to our companies. So how can we get the business leadership to get re-energized, to really start leading, helping to lead this movement, not do it all, but they have a real important role in it.
They do. I will say really quickly, one example of a business that was a leader at the very beginning when it was very tough, one could argue, to take a stand was Costco. When Costco said, we're not getting rid of our DEI programs. And then at the same time, Target was being boycotted. Now take a look at both of them in terms of their stock valuations. I mean, it's not even close. So if you really want to see the benefits of sticking up for what's right and living what's right and doing things that are best for your company, I think that's a great example.
And that's a great example of the business leadership stepping out and also then the community supporting them.
Absolutely.
So, because many leaders would say to me, we were getting these inquiries, we were getting these threats, and I looked over my shoulder and I didn't know what kind of support I was going to get if I stepped out and put a voice to this. So I think it's really important, for us to figure out how do we collaborate.
Absolutely.
Really much more fully and aggressively.
All right. Well, ladies, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Avis DeWeaver and Dr. Vanessa Weaver. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, you can count on WC9 to stay on top of the reductions to the federal workforce, those affected, and what it means for our communities. In the meantime, scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to a special section of WUSA9.com dedicated to our coverage of this story. And of course, we'll keep you updated right here on federal workforce fallout. We appreciate you being here. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.